Thank you. I have to thank Rabbi Kupko for explaining some of the things that I'd like to expand on. The midos of Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferes, which are really the theme that I'd like to talk about. Just to explain a little bit, Yaakov was my landlord 50 years in 1966. And it's because of him that I'm here today wearing the yarmulke. When I met him, I perceived him as being on the side of Gvura, strict, rigorous. He was my landlord, a lawyer, Harvard lawyer, and I was on the liberal side, and over the almost 50 years that we collaborated as friends, disagreeing all the time about almost everything, I moved to his side and he moved to my side, and then I think we both came towards the middle, and that's what I'd like to talk about, what that means in terms of Klal Yisrael and the world and the mission of Klal Yisrael. We often say when somebody goes to Shemayim that he should be a Melis Yosher, he should set the record straight in Shemayim. And I was imagining, like, what would Yaakov, how would he go about doing that? And the picture that came to mind was, everybody knows that watch E.T., they have the bicycle going up to the sky. So in our picture, Yaakov pedaling on the bicycle, and it's on the basket on front, instead of an extraterrestrial, it's piled high with leaflets, which is parsha sheets, and he's riding up there to Shemayim, and he wants to set the record straight, so he's throwing these, airplanes at Shemayim. Now, I explained this to a friend of mine who also had a very warm recollection of Yaakov. He said, no, it wasn't like that at all. No, that's not what's going on. He says, in Shemayim they have a big, a huge place where all of the Talmid Chachamim, the Gedolim, and the Tzaddikim of all the generations sit, and this is the Bezin in Shemayim, the heavenly court, and they start the proceedings. They're judging Klal Yisrael, and there's a prosecutor there, and in the course of the proceedings, his hand goes up in the back and says, "Excuse me," and this is what Yaakov used to do. No matter where he was, and he would start expressing a question or a point of view, and the next. So he says he imagined that Yaakov is up there in Shemayim, and he gets up, and he's giving this impassioned, warm, powerful speech, and it carries the day. And I don't know what the speech was about, but I'd like to surmise that it had to do with this whole issue of Chesed and the Schus of Klal Yisrael. Excuse me. It occurred to me on the way here that why do we need a Melis Yosher in Shemayim? In Shemayim, that's the place where there's Emes, right? So why do they need people from down here to come up and from the Olam HaSheker to come up to Shemayim to teach them about the Emes? And it's really a question that I don't really have a good answer for. Possibly one aspect of it is that a person's lifetime on this earth is a schut. It's a schut for Klal Yisrael, all of us. And thank you. And that serves when judgments are happening at Shemayim, affecting Klal Yisrael. That serves on our behalf. That the totality of a person's life is expressed and is recognized by all of us down here in a more truthful way perhaps, when the person passes on to Shemayim. And our way of expressing that is to imagine to ourselves that somehow there's somebody up there upstairs who's saying, talking to Hashem and telling him, here's the way it really is. Obviously that's not, Hashem doesn't need that. But the idea is legitimate, because once we express that, when we come to terms with the truth of a person's life, that itself, that recognition affects all of us, and it motivates us to be more like that person and to amplify those zchuyot that the person represented in his life, and that in itself is a melech yosher, so to speak, in Shemayim. The last few parshas, this week, next week, we're talking about Avram Avinu. If there's one person that I would think of representing Yaakov, in comparison, it was Avram Avinu. I don't say this easily. I really associate him with Avram Avinu. He ran around the world proclaiming the greatness and the existence of Hashem. And he was totally devoted to that. He was an enormous personality in that respect, and I don't know of any example in my personal life of anybody who represented that. I'd like to look at Avram Avinu for a moment. There are two aspects which are almost contradictory. Avram Avinu represents Chesed on the one hand, right? He's the Hafnas Yisrochim. He goes out of his way, he said just after the bris, to bring in the malachim, the strangers, and so many different aspects of chesed that the Torah tells us about Avram Avinu. On the other hand, reluctantly, he has to send away Hagar and Ishmael, and there's, of course, the Yakedah. Yakedah represents, the descending away represents the Tzad of Gvura. But he's epitomized basically as Amud HaChesed. And the question that comes to mind, why do we call ourselves Klal Yisrael, by and large? And we say we're named B'nai Abraham, but the term used most often, the Ab that's picked most often to be representative of our nation is Yaakov, not Abraham. But the Midah HaChesed is the most fundamental Midah. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world to do Chesed. The whole Yesod of Chesed was implanted by Avram Avinu. It's a major Jewish Midah where we are the nation of Chesed. We refer to the Torah as Torah's Chesed. The Yesod of the universe, of the creation is Olam Chesed Yibaneh. And Chesed is primary in a certain sense. So the Midah of Yaakov, which is a synthesis, a balance between Chesed and Gevura, the two poles, we identify ourselves with Yaakov, Eretz Yisrael. Yisrael represents the epitome of the achievement of Yaakov. Eretz Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, B'nai Yisrael. Why do we identify with Yaakov as primarily, rather than Abraham, if Chesed is so primary? And I think an approach to this is to look at the way Chesed is represented in the world. We have a religion that is not ours, which claims to be a religion of love, chesed, right? This is a religion which accounts for murdering lots of Jews over many years and lots of other people. And they pride themselves as the religion of chesed, where they characterize the Torah, l'havdil, as a religion with a vengeful, a vengeful type of religion which they're replacing. Okay? So they have a perversion of chesed. We also see in our modern day life, we have people who utilize the label of chesed in perverted ways, like Rabbi Fogelman was explaining. A lack of boundaries, sexual aberrations, lack of borders, right? And I'd like to relate a story that I heard from Rabbi Yaakov Fogelman in Matei Shemesh. he was speaking to a group of birthright teens, I suppose. And this particular group had very little knowledge about Judaism. And so he decided, well, what am I going to talk about? I'll talk about chesed. I'll talk about how bein adam chavero, being good to others, being good to other Jews, how that's such a fundamental aspect of our religion. And at the end, a young lady raises her hand and she says, that sounds very, very beautiful, all that you're talking about. She says, but I don't understand one thing. Why is it that the Jews, according to our religion, we use the blood of non-Jewish children to bake matzahs? So she was serious. And so he's standing there like, what am I supposed to answer? And finally, he comes up with, well, do your parents do that? And she says, of course not, they're not religious. Okay, now that's funny, but it's also tragic, because it's serious, it's true, okay? There is a perception about Jews that despite that we're fundamentally a religion which is suffused with chesed, but we're perceived as anything but. We're perceived over the generations as killers and people who are out for money and people who are occupiers today, okay? And it goes so far as to look at the news. The Supreme Court is concerned that somebody was nominated, chosen actually, to be the Rav Tzva'i, the head of the rabbi in charge of the army. The Supreme Court is concerned that he believes that, according to the Torah, Jewish soldiers are supposed to go out and rape non-Jewish enemies. And there's actually a perception on the part of people in the Supreme Court that this is part of our religion. Now, how does that, if that happened in some faraway place where people never met Jews, that would be one thing. But we're talking about here in Eretz Yisrael, about people whose mamaloshon is Hebrew, and who have been educated, they're intelligent, they're judges, they're on the Supreme Court, and their perception of our religion is so distorted that they think that it's the antithesis of chesed. Now, how can that be? Chesed has been hijacked in many different ways, not only by another religion, but if you look at, for instance, the situation in the United States, there's a party of chesed and there's a party of ke'ilu gevura, and they're so polarized that anyone in one party thinks the other people are totally off the end of the earth, and the epitome of evil. Okay, so what that means to me is that the proper understanding of Seder Chesed, as it's intended by the Torah, within, as Rabbi Yaakov said, the proper parameters, that understanding of the parameters of Chesed is totally separated in people's minds from the ideal of Chesed, the ideal of love. Okay. So getting back to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So the mission of Klal Yisrael is to bring civilization towards a maturity where Mashiach can come. Okay, the Avos represent the standard bearers for different aspects of the foundation of Klal Yisrael. Okay, Avram represents Chesed, Yitzchak represents Gevura, and Yaakov represents Tiferes, the synthesis, the balance between the two of them, which in our religion is manifested through halacha, Torah Sheba'al Peh. In other words, the arbiter of where the balance lies between the competing interests of Chesed and Gevura the arbiter, which is Tiferes, which is and also represents beauty. The arbiter is the process of halacha that has come down to us through Torah Shabbat, and Torah Shabbat itself, of course, through generations. Okay, and we have thousands of Talmid Chachamim and Gedolim and Tzaddikim that participated in this process. And the world has something analogous, they call it jurisprudence. Okay, try to come to through the process of secular law, lahavdil, to arrive at what is really fair and balanced, but they don't quite pull it off the way the Torah does. Our mission in as a nation is to be a light unto the nations, and kingdom of priests. What does that mean? Light unto the nations, kingdom of priests. Doesn't only mean that we have good technical startups here, startup nation, which we do. But that's really a superficial manifestation of something much deeper, which is that as we perfect ourselves as a people in the by following the examples that were paved by the patriarchs, then we educate the world to come into balance. The world is out of balance. Just look at what's going on. The world is out of balance. And part of the lack of balance is the misunderstanding of what Gvura is on the one hand, and misunderstanding of what Chesed is on the other hand. We can speak about this for hours, but I just want to conclude by saying that the reason that we're called Klal Yisrael is because the balance and the synthesis and the integration that that Klal Yisrael as a light unto the nations, as an institution, is derived from the institution of the Avos, and the Av that epitomizes this balance and synthesis and integration is Yaakov. Okay? And I think it's not surprising that the person we're here to honor tonight, his name is Yaakov. Yaakov represented to me someone who was a teacher of open-mindedness. Sometimes his mind was not open in the way that I like. But his open-mindedness, he would integrate multiple perspectives from many different sources. And ultimately I learned that that's what Gemara is. Gemara, when you study Gemara in Yeshiva, you don't take one position. So the Chazal say, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom ba'olam. Obviously there are many different ways to explain that. The way that I like to explain it is that Talmidei Chachamim have the capacity to understand Rashi and Tosfos and the Ramban and the Rashba and the Rishonim and the Achronim, and they can integrate them. And that process of halacha, which Talmidei Chachamim engage in, is a process of integration and balance. And that is the essence of Klal Yisrael. When we want to bring this world to a conclusion of the era of Moshe Mashiach, and it's necessary for to achieve this synthesis, this balance, and that's our mission as a nation. And that's why we call it Klal Yisrael, because Yisrael, Yaakov, epitomizes that synthesis and that balance. And I think that Yaakov Ishtam Yoshev Olam, Titein Emes Yaakov, all of those qualities we learned, all of us here, from our teacher, Yaakov Fogelman. And I really don't know what he's doing in Shemayim, but and whether he's busy in the way that we imagine or some other way. But I do know one thing. He taught us to strive in this way for the mission of Klal Yisrael. He was devoted to it with every fiber of his being. And we continue to grow from his influence. And that in itself is a Me'elatz Yotzer in Shemayim. The fact that we're here, we're discussing what he taught us, that we're manifesting all these lessons in our lives. that is the Melitz Yosher, the true Melitz Yosher that he represents. And in that merit, his neshama will continue to flourish in Yetz Hashem and Shemayim. And hopefully, if it's needed, he should be successful in convincing the Bezdin Shalmala with his Harvard Law education that we're okay and she should come soon, and shower blessings on all of us.